Nintex platform today. And we'll go ahead and look at some of these things. I'm planning to not PowerPoint you to death today. I want to make sure that I can make a few points and get some points across to you, and then we'll go into building a solution, a leave request solution, and we'll do some pretty cool things. I also want to point out that there's been some new capabilities. Nintex is really great about rolling out new capabilities and making your life easier. So I'm going to talk to those as well as we kind of go through this. So first off, let's start with this of how to ask questions. And since I'm running the seminar basically by myself today, what I wanted to do is say, please go ahead and type in your questions in there. I will try to get to them, but I really want to point out, if you take a look in the lower left-hand side of the screen, alexv@netwoven.com, if you'd send me an email, I'll respond to you fairly quickly about anything Nintex related. So if I don't get a chance to answer your questions today on the webinar, feel free to send me an email and I will get back to you. Taking a look at who Netwoven is here, just so you know, we are a global company based in the Bay Area, and we were founded by some former Microsoft executives, as you can see here, in 2001. So I did myself work at Microsoft for almost 2 decades, and have built some good relationships with the people that started this company, and I'm very proud to work for them. As you can see, we have a list of all the companies. This is not all of them, but some of the top companies that we work with around the world, in the Bay Area as well. And if you take a look what the services we offer, we are a Microsoft shop. When you take a look at some of the things we do, it's all related to Microsoft technologies and integrating different disparate systems as well. So even though we are pretty much a Microsoft shop, since we do so much integration work and different types of collaborative solutions that we build, we end up touching a lot of different systems. But what I want you to take away today is we are a #1 Nintex Premier partner, and basically what that means is that when you look at how you purchase Nintex and how you actually go around getting services and stuff, it's all partner driven. And if you take a look here at this slide, just so you know who I am, and just looking at my background as far as development and doing geospatial solutions across 2 different platforms, there being in Google Maps. And one of the things we're pretty proud of here that I really try to keep at the top of my list here is making sure that anyone that ends up using Nintex is exceptionally happy. So a lot of times, a lot of work that I do is non-billable, and I will help you be successful on this platform. So we'll go through it and take a look. And if you take a look at this slide, this is a reason why you're probably here today and looking at ways of streamlining your business. And this chart right here is one information worker. So think about one person in your company and think about yourself of how many of these on the left side there you could check off and say, yeah, I spend a lot of time doing this or that. And when I talk to most people, they can almost check off almost every one of these. So what we're really trying to do with the platform, and when you take a look at the capabilities of the platform, is making sure that all the types of things that take up that time, that we can shrink those time frames down by automating things that you do. Most people end up having situations where you're sending stuff in paper form, or it could be in electronic form, but you're doing it as an email attachment, or you try to do it in SharePoint Designer, and it gets very complex. So one of the things that Nintex brings to the table is basically these 6 capabilities. The first one is being able to do workflows that can automate any kind of business process. This is inside of SharePoint or outside of SharePoint. Nintex no longer has a requirement that you have to have SharePoint in order to create workflows. So they have a workflow engine that works in the cloud. You drag and drop and design workflows. The same thing with forms. We're going to go into great detail in forms today and take a look at some of the things we can do. But we can create forms for the internet, for the intranet and also for mobile devices. And that's where this third item comes up here of Nintex Mobile. Nintex Mobile is an application that you can download for free onto any device, any mobile device that you have. And any forms that you've created will show up on your Nintex mobile device as long as you have access to them. So what this means is, you know, for doing expense reports or surveys or you name the type of application, we can push our forms out to a mobile device and use that as an input, and that can be connected or disconnected. And I'll be doing a demonstration of that today as we go through with the demonstration of this product. The Nintex connectors here on the fourth item is our ability to connect to different systems. So think of your SAPs, your Salesforce.com, Microsoft CRM, DocuSign, all these different types of applications that you want to integrate into your business process. You can do that using Nintex connectors. And then you also have DocGen. Document generation is something new that just came out recently from Nintex. And what this allows you to do is actually collect data from disparate data sources and use templates to generate documents. And I have a slide coming up that really kind of shows the power of this. And lastly, on your right-hand side is the ability to store information in the cloud. So think about every time someone does an expense report, you might want to collect what department they're from, what the expense was all about, and what their geography was. And then later on, what you can do is with that data that you're storing in the data warehouse in Nintex Hawkeye, you can actually report on that using something like Tableau or Power BI. So a lot of functionality there. You're not having to set up your own data warehouse. You just put in what's called beacons into your workflow. These beacons allow you to stream the data into a data warehouse and report on them at a future point. So I talked about document generation, and the whole thing I really want you to come back with is, you know, a lot of people use other applications to try to generate documents, but a lot of times you get painted in the corner because you don't have the flexibility to do stuff that DocGen can do. So document generation is the ability to use in your workflow, you're able to use templates and create documents in different types of outputs. So for instance, I can have 3 different documents. One could be in Word, one could be Excel, and one could be in PowerPoint. And as I'm collecting data in my workflow, as you see on the screen, I can merge that data together, fill out the templates, and then have it output a PDF for me, or I can have all those documents come back in as their native format. So I might just have a Word document that's a contract, but I want to automatically fill out the customer information from SAP, and I have my own database where I'm pulling information about that customer to be able to give them some kind of document, some kind of custom document. So this is all built into Nintex now. And it makes it very easy just by configuring this, and we can dynamically include documents and exclude them. So if you think about something like employee onboarding or contract management, you can actually tell document generation what to include and what not to include in your business logic, which is really a great feature for doing custom reports and custom contracts. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about that's available for you, and this is something that's recently new, and it works on on-prem or Office 365, is this concept of being able to do responsive forms. Now, on the right-hand side, when you're dealing with a classic form, you're dealing with the ability to do pixel-perfect layout of your form. It can be kind of tedious for people that want to just create a quick form and move things around and have them show up in the general area that they want to, and that's something that responsive forms gives you now that's been implemented in Nintex. So this just came out within the last month. Here, if you're looking at the designer for responsive forms right here, I have a title, company, email, phone, but when you're dragging and dropping from the left-hand side to the right-hand side onto the form, you no longer have the situation where controls can overlap and hide each other, and all the all the idiosyncrasies that happen when you're trying to get pixel perfect, what responsive forms does for you is allows you to lay out controls, but the controls are their own entity. They never overlap on each other, and they automatically move in a way to accommodate what the screen size is. So we'll take a look at that as we go through this, but I really want you to understand that this is a great new feature that a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. It makes creating forms, I would say it cuts down your time for designing forms by about 3/4 of the time if you were to do this in any other product like InfoPath or any of those other products that don't support this type of responsive UI. And this also translates to mobile devices as well. So when you create one form, it will actually target any device and lay itself out correctly based on that device. So for those of you that have ever used Nintex before, you know that having to create multiple forms for different devices can be time intensive, where now you just create one form. You don't even have the option to select what the target device is, because it will automatically lay out things for you. And we'll take a look at some of those layouts as well. What I want to emphasize today too is that a lot of times when I'm talking to customers, they really want to try to solve big problems right off the bat. That's their first challenge with Nintex, when they kind of don't realize that a lot of the things that take up a lot of time are the kinds of things that you're seeing on the screen right here. And so I just want to put this out as a reminder that some of the simple tasks can be things that make life a lot easier for people and really save a lot of money and resources for you. Now, today what I'm going to build is we're going to automate a leave request with Nintex, where on the left-hand side an employee is going to fill out a form for the type of leave they're going to take. We're going to automate the process of sending that form or that request to a manager. We're going to take that request from a manager. If it's approved, and we'll actually we're going to update a central calendar so that everyone on the team will know when someone's out, or it could be a manager calendar. But just these are the type of simple things that are very time consuming normally when you're trying to build something like this, where we can actually build this in a matter of hours, not weeks or months or anything like that. As far as designing the workflow, both designers that you use, whether it's on-premise SharePoint or Office 365, give you the ability to drag and drop without having to write any code. And then we can basically trigger the workflow to run based on some external events. So the majority of what most people do is they start the workflow based on the user creating an entry in a SharePoint list. But you have different options as well. You can schedule a workflow to run on a timely basis. So every hour, every 5 hours, every month, every day, you have that ability. So those are kind of your maintenance workflows that you can run. You can tie it to modifications to an entry, but you can also do it external, run Nintex workflows externally from some event that happens outside of SharePoint. And like I mentioned previously, you do have the capability to write workflows in the cloud that have no concept of SharePoint. So you kind of covered on a lot of different bases as far as the workflows that you're going to create there. And one thing I want to really emphasize is you do have the ability to automate any type of request. So I was showing you that previous slide and of all the different types of things we can do. But this pattern that you see on the right-hand side is very common, where we end up having something submitted, it kicks off the workflow, we send email notifications, we assign tasks to a user to approve or reject, and then we let everyone know via email that they've been approved or denied. This is a very simple pattern that gets used a lot for some of the types of applications I was showing you previously. There's also this other great feature. This is probably the #1 manager feature, where we can respond to a task via email. So when you're assigning a task to someone, an email goes out to that person to say, hey, you have a task. That task is in SharePoint if that's the way you set it up. That person has the ability to respond to the task like it says here via email. So they don't have to be online They just have to be connected to their email system and be able to respond with either a yes, no, okay, approved, denied. There's about 16 different keywords that you can use, and all you need to do is respond to the email to be able to do that. So this gives people that are on the go the ability to be able to work not chained to their desktop as far as dealing with SharePoint and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that end up doing stuff that's way more complex than just your standard one-time approval, right? Not just a manager. Like if you take a look at this, this is a 3-level approver. Once a submitter submits a requisition request here, it goes through 3 levels of approvals that you see in the diamond shapes. And based on approval or denial, we can move down the line and actually have this go from end to end. One thing I want to point out is Nintex is very good at being able to do these really complex, dynamic type of workflows where you might have the situation where you get to a 3rd level approval and then that person decides, hey, I need more information from the C-level approver. And what happens there is that we can easily jump backwards or forwards depending on some dynamic conditions that might exist as part of your workflow. So when you take a look at this next screen, I want you to see that the Nintex Workflow Designer has something called a state machine. A state machine is what gives you the ability to be able to do much more complex workflows that are nearly, I won't say impossible in SharePoint Designer, but when you take a look at how you can do that inside of Nintex, it will save you weeks of effort. And the reason is the state machine allows you to run down each individual branch that you see here, but every time you get to the bottom of a branch, you're basically telling it what next branch you want to go to. So initial submit will actually jump to C-level approval. Based on the task assigned here, with the flexi task that you see at the bottom in the 2nd column, if it was approved, then we would jump to the AHI approval, and then if that one's approved, we'd jump to final approval. And if you notice in the previous slide, we had a condition, if it was greater than $10,000, then we want to do something else. So this triangle that you see on the right-hand side for the decision, that actually translates to this condition, either yes or no, or greater than $10,000. And then when we get to the bottom of this branch, assuming everything went okay, we would jump to the end branch. So just so you know, this is something that I cover extensively when you're taking a look at acquiring an Nintex and helping you understand how to do really complex workflows that can jump dynamically from one branch to another. And these are very real-world things like document approvals and going through that whole phase. Or if you think about employee onboarding where you have a checklist of things that need to be done, this state machine inside a Nintex workflow is what gives you that ability to create those complex workflows inside of this tool. On the form side, one thing that really sticks out to me is that you do have this responsive forms that you can do now. But another thing too as well is that you can create very, very complex forms without having to write any code. And we do a separation. Nintex does a separation of user interface versus code, so it keeps a much cleaner separation. If you're an InfoPath user, you're very much used to creating a form and having code that sits behind it. One of the things that Nintex is really good is the separation of duties there, so that we can make sure that the input just deals with the input, and then the workflow that sits behind that is done in the workflow part of it. So there's no hard coding or spaghetti code that's going in there to tie them together. It's very clean. The workflow has access to every field on the form as it runs. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, anywhere, anytime, form access, you have the ability to do mobile and push your forms out to mobile. On the on-premise version, you can also push them public. So what does that mean? It means I can take a form and I can publish it so that people on the internet have access to that form outside the firewall. So, and you can do this in 2 different ways. It can be either anonymous, so they're filling out the information anonymously from a link, or it can actually be authenticated. So you give this link to somebody, they have to authenticate themselves, then they can fill out the form. They fill out the form, they hit submit, that data comes all the way back into our SharePoint list, and then we'll kick off our workflow if we have one, and put that data in there. So it's really a great way of being able to push different solutions out to different target audiences based on your requirements that you have. The Nintex Mobile, like I said, is an application that you download for free onto your phone, and this will give you the ability to have access to any forms that you would normally have access to in SharePoint. So authentications is dealt with once you install the application and you put in your username and password and give it a URL to your actual site, and it will give you access to all those forms that you have access to. So this is great. Like I said, you could do this non-connected as well. So think about doing an expense report on an airplane where you pull out your purse or wallet and you're taking pictures of your expense receipts, and then you're filling out the form. You can do that all offline. And then once you hit the ground and you got connectivity, you can actually hit submit and keep that going. So this is kind of a screen view, and I'm going to show you my real phone with the ability to show you what can be done with this. But on the right's a tablet, on the left's a mobile phone, and having the ability to look at forms, look at all the tasks that are assigned to you, and be able to configure the application to your preferences. Okay. Lastly, here is really taking a look at Nintex Live. You know, I talked about these ways to be able to connect to third parties. So think of your Salesforce.com, CRM, all these different applications you can connect to. Nintex has a whole catalog of different applications that you can connect to. So the ones you're seeing on the screen are just for examples of being able to push and pull information. So you can definitely do some custom things that you might be trying to do. And so what I want you to come away with from this slide is that you're not just stuck on doing everything in SharePoint and that's all you can do. You can definitely reach outside of the firewall and push and pull information as needed, and looking at your business requirements. So what I want to do now is I want to take a look at creating a leave request, and I do this demo for all these seminars because I think this kind of is a great example of what a lot of people end up doing. Just so you know, we end up giving you, when you purchase Nintex, we end up giving you a bunch of different templates to do stuff like what I'm showing you today. So definitely, you know, you should think about talking to me about some solutions you might want to build, because like expense reporting and time off requests or travel requests, employee reviews, we've got that all already built, and we give you those templates as a starting point. So here I am in SharePoint. I do have a list. You can see that this list has basically 6 columns, so you're looking at your SharePoint list. One of the things I do when I go and take a look at the list, I'm using an on-prem version, but it's almost identical in the Office 365 version. So whether I do it in one or the other, it doesn't really matter. The concepts are identical. The UIs are almost identical as well. So if I were to create a new item here, you'll notice that I just get a generic form, and this is your common generic form that comes up inside of SharePoint. But what I want to do is I want to make a customized form. So let's go ahead and hit Nintex Forms. And once we do that, it actually automatically tries to lay out the forms for you and all the fields on it. So what we're trying to do is basically customize it. So I want to do a couple custom things here so you can really see the power of what's going on here. So let's say that I don't need attachments. Status is something that's not really should be on this form. It's actually part of my list so that the user knows the status of their item that they submitted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select these items and delete these items, and then we'll just take everything down below and move that up. Now let's do some cool things here. Now on a leave request, you can take vacation time. Let me just show you in a preview. We can actually preview and generate a preview so you can see what the form would look like in its generic fashion. And you'll notice that I have different leave types. So I have other, leave without pay, floating holiday, sick leave, annual leave, okay? I also have start date and end date. So I want to make this form have some a little more complexity than just being generic. And so the way we do that is the first thing I want to do is I want to add some rules that say I don't want to show other description unless the leave type is equal to other. So how do I do that? I select these two controls, the title or the label and the control, and then I go up here at the top and I say add a rule. So this rule, I'm going to call it, we'll call it the other rule up in the right hand side. I'm calling it other rule, and this is a formatting rule that says I want to hide this control. At the bottom right, you can see I can hide it, but I need to put a condition in here. Now, this is very similar. These types of conditions that you put in here are very similar to what you do in Excel formulas. It's very much the same. So the condition is I need to say that something is equal to true. It will actually hide that control. So I'm going to open up this formula builder, and I'm going to say if the leave type does not equal other, so look at this condition in the right. If the leave type does not equal other, if this is true, I want you to hide. So you can see that I'm hiding down in the lower right. So let's go ahead and take a preview of that and see if that's working correctly. So we can go back and forth here, you know, between preview mode while we're testing. But I want you to notice if you take a look at the form, other's gone now, unless, you know, if I put sick leave, nothing changes. But if I put other, I want you to notice how description ends up showing up there or going away. So it automatically hides it. It automatically brings stuff up from the bottom so that it automatically adjusts the screen size for that. So that's one rule. And another one of rules that we can have, we have two types of rules we can do. We can do formatting and we can also do validation. Okay, so let's move stuff around a little bit. Let me go ahead and move start date over a little bit. And we're going to put these on one line. And just so you know, I'm not using the responsive forms in here. I'm just showing you the classic forms here, just to show you the difference between the two. We'll bring the other one up shortly. But I have this end condition as well. So I'm going to bring that up here. And I can take everything from the bottom and move that up. Now, what I wanted to show you is what happens if the user accidentally puts in a date, an end date that is before the start date. How do I make sure that that doesn't happen? So first off, what I do is I select the control, the end date. Let me select that control. Then I'm going to add another rule here. I can go up here and add a rule. So rule 2 is going to be date check. I'm going to call it date check. And what date check does, it's not a formatting rule, it's a validation rule. So notice that the condition changes here. It says this control is invalid if. So you got to think about that. This is invalid if. So I need to write a little formula that says it's invalid if. So here's my formula. If my end date is less than my start date, then that control is invalid. Okay, that's a very simple rule here. This control is invalid if my end date is less than my start date. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Oh, one thing else I want to point out in the lower right hand side too is I'm going to say date error, please check the end date. Now you could type anything you want to in here, but this gives you another level of validation that you wouldn't get if you were just using straight SharePoint. So let's go ahead and take a look at the preview, and I'll generate the preview. We'll take a look, and we're going to go ahead and type in the title, select the value of other. So we're getting all this information, but let me go ahead and change the end date to be something like 8:30, and then if I try to go in here and hit submit, you'll notice that I get that message that I put down there, right? So taking a look at this, you can do pretty much any type of rules that you want to. We can hide and show controls. So this gives us the ability to do some pretty cool things here. So I go in there and it's like everything's working correctly. So what I can do now is I can go ahead and publish this if I wanted to make this a form. But one last thing I want to do before we go on is I want to target a Nintex mobile phone because I have a Nintex mobile phone. So I'm going to go in here and it's going to automatically lay out my my mobile device here. So it tries to figure out what I did. All the rules are going to still apply here. So now when we go ahead and take a look at a preview, I can preview this on my mobile device. So watch this. I'm going to generate a preview, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hope that I don't get any nasty texts from my friends, but watch this. I'm going to open up Nintex Mobile. You can see it on the screen there. And I open up Nintex Mobile. Here are all the tasks that I have. Let me go to my forms. And I'm going to hit refresh in the upper right. And when I hit refresh in the upper right, there's our leave request. So I open that up, and here's this leave request application I did. And let me go ahead and I'll put in a title, time off. What's the leave type? You can see the different leave type. Watch this. If I go in and put sick leave, I want you to notice that I don't see a place down below to put any description, but if my leave type was other, I want you to notice that down at the bottom now, I can put in a description, right? So when we come in here for doing a description, the cool thing is I'm on a mobile device, and your mobile device has speech recognition. I need some time off today. So, this is one of the cool things about when you're doing an application that's related to a mobile device. Now let's go ahead and take a look. We had that situation I was showing you as well, where if I went for the end date that was before the start date. So let's go ahead and try this and try to hit submit and watch what happens. And what it should have done there it is. Well, something happened. I guess I didn't publish that. I didn't publish that rule yet. This was just doing it without the rule. But this, if I published this and actually did this on the mobile device after publishing, then everything would have worked here as far as the different policies go. So that was my leave request there. And if I refresh, that was just a preview, so you won't see it on the screen anymore. So I can keep on going from then on. But what the cool thing here is if I actually did a publish in the upper left-hand side, it's going to tell me that I'm publishing. It's going to tell me about all the validation rules that I have, and then it would actually go out and do that. So that form's been published completely. If we go ahead and take a look now, here's the real form in the leave request. Okay, so all the things that we just did end up showing up there and doing the right thing. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at doing the workflow side of this. How hard is it to do the workflow side of it? So I go to workflow settings, I go new Nintex workflow, and I'm going to just I'm going to start from a blank. You can use templates here. The first thing we do is we go in here and we look at workflow settings, and how do we want this workflow to start? Do we want to start it manually, or do we want to be able to do it when an item is created? Okay, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to select that. I can do verbose logging. I don't want to create a status column, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that. And so that's where I'm starting here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and assign a task to somebody that will be approval or rejection. This is going to go to a manager. But I'm also going to do some cool things here. I just want you to see the linkage between the workflow and the list, that I can dynamically update the list. So remember we had that status column? So I'm going to go up here and select the field that I want, which is status, and I'm going to say under review. So that's going to be the status when we start, will be the first thing that's up there. I'm going to copy this control, and I'm just going to paste it, and then we'll make our changes here. So This is one of the beauties of cutting and pasting. So on this one, when we reject, we're going to actually put rejected by, and then I'll just put rejected. This will make it simple. Save, and then over here on this right one, we're going to go ahead and do approved. So we're just taking this and saying approved. So what this has done for us is this is actually going to write back to the list and update those columns. So this is your linkage from the workflow running in the background to be able to update the status column to show you what you're doing. Now, for the task that's being assigned to the person, here's the assignee. We can go and select dynamically who should be able to have this task assigned to them. And I just want you to know, if you take a look, I could have this go to the initiator. I could also go to the manager if I wanted to. The problem is I'm doing a demonstration here, and I really don't want to send my manager something, so they always think I'm taking a vacation. So I'm just going to have this go to me. I'm going to play the manager role right here. You can see it picks it up out of Active Directory, and I'm going to come up here and say, here's a task description. I'm going to say time off for, and we're going to use the initiator's display name. So you can see I'm building a dynamic string, and then I'm going to put a space and a hyphen and say what they're doing. So they're taking a leave type, and you'll notice if I double click there, the leave type is going to show up. So you're going to see time off. That's a description for this that you'll see right here. There's all kinds of cool things that happen with this that people always ask about. One of the things I also want to point out here is that when we take a look at the different things, we have task notifications, the person getting the email. This is a generic one. Also reminders. So how many reminders do you want over the course of how many days, right? Also escalation. What happens if someone doesn't do something in a time frame? You can escalate. So you can delegate the task, or you can auto-complete the task. And lastly, you have the ability to modify the form so that you can make sure that the manager, if that manager is online and not doing this through lazy approval, they have this form where they can say, okay, what's the information I need to see? Well, I don't need to see task or other description. As a manager, maybe all I care about are a few of the items here. So all I care about is the leave type and the start date and end date. So let's say that I just want my form to show this information. We can set that up so that that's all that people are going to see. Okay, when they go to it. So I'm modifying that form, now you can see I can save that. So I'm saving that form, and we can close. And now when we go back here and take a look at the action, I have all these different things that I've put in here that are hopefully correct. So when I save this, now we're sending it to somebody for approval or rejection. So one of the last things I want to do here is I want to create an item. So think about this. I want to actually create an item in a calendar. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can actually create items. And if you look at create item is going to give us the ability to say I want to create an item in a list or any of my artifacts in SharePoint. So most of these things you do manually, this is where we can automate. What I care about is a leave calendar, which is a calendar item. Notice it knows the type of it. And now I can come up here and say something like, okay, I'm going to put in item properties. Let's go ahead and say common. We're going to have the initiator's display name dash time off of type. And this is what's going to show up in the calendar. Time off of type. Let's go ahead and say leave type. And we'll say OK to that. So that's going to be the title. The start time and end time, we already have that from the list. So we can do a list lookup, and we can actually look at the start time, the start date, and then the end time here. We're going to go get that data from the list as well. And we have the field that's called end date. right? So there are the fields that I'm using: start time, end time, and title. I could add other fields if I want to. You have access to more fields here, like description and category, all these different things that you can add in there, but we're just going to go generic for right now, okay? So I'm going to hit save. Now, if this form works correctly, what we're going to see is that we're going to actually have the manager get the ability to approve or deny. We're going to update the item. Now, there's another thing I could do in here as well, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to leave it out. But one of the things I can do is I can send notifications as well. So maybe I'll do it real quick. I'll just do it on this side. If we do get an approval, I'm going to send an email to that person. So whoever filled out the form, so on the 2, I'm going to use initiator. So I can go back to this list and say, who was initiator? And what I want to say to them. So I'm going to say, your time off has been approved. And I'm going to cut and paste that down below, just so for the sake of time. And maybe I'll put in an extra thing for the time off type that they're taking, so leave type. So I can dynamically create these strings and do this. So now what we should see is an email that goes to that person letting them know that they've been approved and that their leave type has been approved right there. So think you could pretty much add anything you want to in there. So I'm going to save that. Now we go ahead and publish that. And I'm going to give it a workflow name, WF workflow 1000. I'm just going to, I'm used up a lot of names, so we're publishing this. Okay, so that's taking a little time for there. So let's go ahead and take a look. There's a question that came through here. Can you take classic forms and convert them to responsive forms? The answer to that question is no, not at the time. They haven't done that yet, but it is in the plans, so that could possibly come out in short time here. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and add an item and watch this in action now. The title is My Time Off. I'm taking a leave type of other, and I'm just going to take today off and say need today off. It's too nice outside. Right, so I'm going to hit save, and so here we have everything running, and now that workflow should be kicked off based on a new item being created. So we see that, you know, the time off, the description, all the stuff we put in the form. That's pretty generic. But what you should see now is, notice that the status is running here, and we see that we're under review there. And the first thing that happens here, and let me get to my email here so I can show this to you. Bear with me for 1 second. I got to get to my email, and here it is here. And let me go and look at something I just received. And so here's the first email that comes through, right? So remember, I was playing the role of a manager, and as a manager, I'm seeing that a task has been assigned to me, and I need to go look at that task. So I'm going to click here to look at that task. And if you take a look at that task, here's that form that we had. Remember, we created that task form, so I can hit approve, reject. Here's the list items. We only wanted, you know, to know the leave type, start date, and end date. We didn't really care about anything else there. So I say approved and I say okay. And so what'll happen next is, if we actually take a look at the leave request here, you can see that the status was updated through the workflow, right? So there it is, approved. But what we also see is we set up an email to the initiator, whoever had sent, filled out the form, and we wanted to get that information. So here's the email that just came back to me. It says, your time off has been approved for type of other. So you can see that we just did that. And lastly here is looking at the calendar, and here's the calendar for the time off. So now we have you know, the start time, the end time, the time off of type other, and we created an item in a team calendar right there. So that was kind of the full loop that I was trying to show you here. Okay, so One thing as well, and when we take a look at looking at the list and finding out what happened, when we go and take a look at workflow history, what I want you to notice is we have the capability of taking a look at the different things that are happening here. This is the on-premise version, gives you a very verbose, detailed look at the workflow. So here's the workflow, workflow 1000. In everything in green is the path that we took. So we know what happened with this workflow was actually approved and it ran all the way to the end. If it had been stopped, it would actually be in yellow. So if you're waiting for the manager and the manager hadn't approved or rejected, this would actually be yellow. But one thing I want you to notice too that you have a capability of is if I put on verbose debugging, and I want you to notice that I can look at every value, the before and after value of every field that you saw. So you might have seen in there I had the initiator's display name. So here's initiator's display name. Here's my initiator. There's my login, right? If we go down here, here's my manager. So here's my manager, Walt DP, manager's display name. So these are all things that were being automatically filled in the context. Now I want you to notice this yellow line right here. Anytime you make a change and update something, it'll actually flag it in yellow saying this was the before value. So on the left side, it was blank and it got converted to under review. Watch this. If we take a look over here when we updated the item here, you'll notice when we go back down in yellow, it was under review and then we changed it to approved. You see this one line under the status? So a lot of information that's being given to you here, so you can take a look at like, what's my site collection ID, all these stuff that you might need to know, like what was the URL to the actual site that I'm in, so that as you're creating workflows and doing things, you have that ability to really figure out what's going on there. Okay. Let me go ahead and bring up the responsive forms, because I wanted to make sure that I gave you that opportunity to take a look at what responsive forms are all about. So the responsive forms, you'll notice that I'm sitting here in Office 365, but it'd be the same if you were sitting inside of on-premise, and I want you to notice how close these look to each other. But the whole idea here is now, instead of being able to do pixel perfect, laying stuff on top of each other as far as controls go, now what happens is I'm dealing with this responsive forms that won't allow me to overlap things. When I try to drag and drop things and overlap and do pixel perfect stuff, I can't do it. I can move them into different locations, but this is the beauty of a responsive form. When you create a responsive form, it'll automatically move stuff around based on the target device. So whether you're using a tablet, whether you're using a phone, or whether you're using the desktop, it'll do stuff. But I can do simple things. I can make fields wider by using this. So if I need a wider field, shorter field, if I'm going to put them all on one line, I can actually go up. See, it won't even allow me to add them because they don't fit on the one line as far as the space that's being used. But I can also do stuff where I can move stuff to the left or move stuff to the right. So you do have some ability to move stuff around. Like you can take a look at company here. Maybe company I want it in uppercase. So I can double click and come up here and say, you know what, the title should be a capital C. So I want to put a capital C there and make it be a capital company. But I can also move the title around, so I can center the title or move it to the right. But what I really want you to come away with is when you're looking at how a responsive form will look to the user and previewing it, will generate a preview. It's always going to lay out the things the way it thinks it should, that hopefully it makes sense. But here's the actual form, and we can print to PDF just like we would in classic forms, but the whole layout's done for us in any type of device to make sure that it is laid out as correctly. So you'll still have to do your testing, but I think you can see from looking at this, as we start to move stuff around, you're not having to deal with that pixel perfect overlap where it takes a lot of time to be able to do stuff like that. Okay, so this is a great advancement for really making forms a lot quicker to create. Let me jump back to here and show you some things. I just wanted to show you how most people end up using Nintex. These are kind of the top things, so just take a second there and review that. And as I pointed out, we do have a lot of templates for a lot of these types of solutions. So if you're thinking about Nintex, you can get a trial of Nintex, a 30-day free trial that you can install. I will help you with that. I'll also help you install any proof of concepts that you want to try to push out within your organization. If you need to prove it to your managers or to upper management or decision makers, I'll give you my email again, so that you can get you can have me help you, and I can understand what kind of things you're trying to solve, what kind of business challenges you have. One thing we do offer a Jumpstart program. Our Jumpstart program is a highly discounted offering. A lot of people use it for just a training alone, or you also get that 88 hours of solution development. So one of the great things about this, if you're doing a POC, you could basically do a proof of concept using a trial edition of Nintex, and what we could do is we could actually build something out. We could train you on the product. If you decide to move forward, great, you've got all the knowledge and you've got some hours to use to build your solutions. If not, you've mitigated your risk. You've only spent $3,900 and you've made sure that you didn't spend a lot more than that on some product that wasn't really going to fit your needs. And so I can help you make those decisions, make an educated decision based on my experience of whether this is a good fit for your company. I don't want to sell something to you that you're not going to use or it's just not going to make you successful, but this is a great program that we have that can really help you move forward. And again, when you're looking at spending thousands of dollars for other competitive products that can't do half of what you can do in Nintex, this $3,900 could be the best investment you've ever made. One thing you should be aware about as well is Nintex. The cost of Nintex, which is usually the next conversation people want to have, we can actually get standard edition that'll allow you to build five solutions basically for $7,500 a year, and that's all inclusive. That includes your software assurance. It includes support. There is a higher level called Enterprise Edition, so you have Standard and Enterprise Edition. Enterprise Edition runs around $11,000 per year, but it has a much higher capabilities as far as the different type of enterprise features that you'd be sacrificing by going to Standard. And a lot of those features are related to like provisioning, like in Office 365, a lot of things that you have to do with provisioning Office 365, that is built into the Nintex workflow to allow you to automate those types of processes. So a question here says, will this recording be available later? Yes, it will. We will post it. I also will send the slide deck to all of you that attended. So by the end of day today, you'll have this slide deck in your hands. Again, my email's down at the bottom. Feel free to send me an email if you need more information about something or you just want to discuss how this could work for your company. Again, I'm a non-billable resource to help you make that right decision, and we would hope to make you one of our successful customers on Nintex, on the Nintex platform. So I really encourage you to get a hold of me and let me know what business problems you're trying to solve, and I can really work with you to make that happen. Okay, I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes here since we have like 5 more minutes. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in there, and I'll be happy to get to as many as I can. If not, and if you're going to leave, I want to thank you for your time. I know your time is valuable, and I hope that I hope that this enlightened you a little bit of why Nintex is the #1 solution on top of SharePoint. Okay, thank you.